So I've spent literally thousands of hours reading books, and this is the exact video that I wish I would have had when I started reading. I would have paid so much money to get this video because it would have saved me hundreds of hours of time. I seriously don't think you should pick up another book until you've watched this video until the end. And it's probably a 10 or 15 minute video, but it seriously has the potential to save you hundreds of hours of time. I'm not exaggerating. This is day 6 of the 7-day mental reset challenge. If you haven't already, click the link in the description and go back to watch all of the other videos in this challenge so that you can reset your mind. I'm going to talk about 14 different mistakes that I made to do with the topic of learning, and then I'm going to give you the solutions to every single one of them. And the video is going to be split up into 3 different parts. First of all comes before you pick up a book, to do with choosing what books to read. Second of all is actually reading the book. And third of all, something that 9 times out of 10 is actually better than reading completely. The first mistake I made was trying to force myself to read books. I had heard all of these different incredibly successful people talk about the importance of reading, so I decided to force myself to read books. I said I was going to read for 30 minutes every single day. I created habit trackers, and I'd get annoyed at myself if I wasn't reading. If you're doing this, then stop. It leads me on to the second mistake, which is reading the wrong books. If you feel like you have to force yourself to read, then you're reading the wrong books. If you read the right book, the problem isn't forcing yourself to read, the problem is putting the book down to do other work. You should read until you love reading. Don't force yourself to read. If you force yourself to read, you're practically giving yourself learning disabilities. I mean, think about it. If you're reading books you don't enjoy, you're going to be reading far slower. You're going to have to be using far more willpower. The retention is going to be far less, and you're not going to want to read the next day. If you're reading books you don't want to read, you're practically giving yourself learning disabilities. Whereas if you read books you are excited for, you are curious about, then you're pretty much boosting your working IQ by 20 points. And the third mistake is that people just don't read or don't learn. Most of the population stops education after formal education. In my eyes, once you've finished formal education, that's the start of your real world education. So the third massive mistake that people make is to just not learn at all. I'm going to give you 7 of the best reasons why you should read and why you should continue to learn long into your life. Reason 1, you right now have a place where you are now and a place that you want to get to. The way that you get from where you are now to where you want to get to is wisdom. If you have the wisdom, it's very easy to get everything you want to get in life. The saying that knowledge is power is completely true. If you have wisdom, all you have to do is touch a butterfly in a certain way, and you know the exact chain reaction that's going to be caused, the butterfly effect, from touching that butterfly, and you know that it's going to end up getting you what you want. If you have wisdom, all you have to do is make a few high leveraged and influential decisions, and everything you want will materialize. Second benefit, knowledge compounds far quicker than money. This was a quote from Benjamin Franklin. If you learn, that learning is going to compound far quicker than money ever could, and over a long period of time you'll become ridiculously wise if you continue to learn. Benefit 3, it's fun. Benefit 4, it's fulfilling. The brain loves to grow. And benefit 5, you can actually live multiple lifetimes in one life if you continue to learn. You can take what took other people lifetimes to learn, condense it down into a few hours, gain all of those lessons, and therefore live multiple lifetimes in one life. And finally, most decisions you make in your life happen automatically. They happen subconsciously. Your brain inputs data it gets from its environment. That data travels down preformed grooves in your brain, and an output is made, a decision is made. By reading, you're able to rewire the grooves in your brain through exposure and repetition so that you can automatically make the correct decision without having to try, without effort. And with all of those benefits out the way, the fourth mistake that people made are reading best-selling books. The way most people decide what books to read is going to a bookstore, looking on the Amazon bestseller list, looking at the New York Times bestseller list, and picking whichever book is best-selling in the category they enjoy. There are 2 massive problems with this approach. First of all, the knowledge you want to be receiving must be rare and valuable. That's how you can get the best kind of knowledge. Just like in economics, we have the supply and demand diagram. You want the knowledge for you to gain to be rare, low supply, and valuable, high demand. That's where you can truly leverage the knowledge you have. And second of all, just because most people are buying a book doesn't mean it's a good book. Books aren't popularity contests, they should be a value contest. And we can define value by how well the book gets you from A, where you are now, to B, where you want to get to. And the fifth and final mistake that people make when choosing what book to read before we move on to actually reading the book is most people read books JIC instead of JIT. Let me explain. Back in the old days, car manufacturers would have a bunch of different parts of all of the different car parts. You've got doors, you've got wing mirrors, everything, and they would store them away in warehouses just in case they needed them for manufacturing. This was incredibly expensive and incredibly inefficient because they had to constantly store all of these different parts, and that was costly. Instead, Toyota came around and started making car parts JIT, just in time, which means as soon as they needed them, they would make them and it would be ready. This way they got rid of all storage costs, and all of a sudden they were able to get the car manufacturing process much more efficient and much more cheap. Now, most people read books just in case. They read books that sound good. They read books that make them feel like they're learning. Where I would argue most of the books you should read should be just in time. As you're facing a specific problem in your life, you should read the book that's going to help you solve that problem. That way you're actually applying the information. You're going to be learning it more because you're excited, because you know it's directly going to benefit you. And all of these reasons mean you're going to retain the information far more. Now, there are counterexamples of this. Books like Principles or Poor Charlie's Almanac are great books for you to read that are just in case. There's no specific problem you'd be having in order to read these books, but 9 times out of 10, the books you want to be reading are just in time. Now that we know how to pick a book, when it actually comes to reading a book, there's a massive mistake people make, and this is the 6th mistake that people make when it comes to reading books. And there's going to be definitions that pop up on screen, so make sure you pause them if you don't understand the words I'm saying. Basically, your time is limited, which means if you spend time on activity A, you cannot spend time on activity B. There is opportunity cost of your time. How you spend your time is a zero-sums game. And because of that, even if something is productive, it doesn't mean you should do it. You've got to ask, is this as productive as other things I could be doing? Say there's a scale of productivity from 0 to 100. If something's a 10 productivity, most people would think, yes, I should be doing that activity. No, if there's something that's an 80 activity, you should fill your time up with the 80 activity instead of the 10 activity, because if you spend time on the 10 activity, you cannot spend time on the 80 activity. When it comes to reading books, most people will commit to reading a book until the end. This is a massive mistake. If you get halfway through the book and you realize that you've actually understood all of the concepts from the book, you should move on to a book that's going to give you a more productive use of your time. You see, most books should be blog posts. Most books actually were blog posts, and then they resonated with an audience, and then they were turned into a book. So with most books, you can get the 80-20 in the first chapter. On top of this, if you're reading a book and you realize you're not enjoying it, you realize you're not curious, you realize you don't want to finish the book, then don't. If there's something that excites you more, or something you think is going to be more beneficial, or you already feel like you've got the concept, stop reading the book and move on. If you find a YouTube channel and you watch one of the videos and you think this is okay, you don't commit to watching the rest of the YouTube videos. You get off the channel and you go to a YouTube channel that excites you more. View books just like this. And the 7th mistake that people make is racing through books. Most people get an ego by knowing how many books they've gone through in a year, how many books they've read. They pile their bookshelf up. But the thing is, it's not about how many books you go through. It's about how many books go through you. That's the most important thing. Who cares if you've read millions of books? First of all, if those books aren't good books, it doesn't matter. And second of all, if you don't implement the books, then you're not getting anything from it. which leads me on to the next mistake that people make, is reading without implementing. If you read without implementing, there's literally no point in reading whatsoever. We're not reading to sound smart, we're reading to improve our life. We're reading to get from where we are now to where we want to get to. It's not always about knowing what to do, it's about doing what you know. Now, with that being said, the ninth mistake that people make is only buying a new book once they've finished the book that they're currently reading. There's a Japanese word called sundoku, which is basically the word for having more books than you'll ever read, and it's incredible for many different reasons. First of all, it's a reminder for how little you know and how much more there is out there. It keeps you humble. Second of all, it makes you excited to get through all these different books and to read a bunch of different books, because there's always loads of different books that excites you. And third of all, it reminds you that there's a limited amount of time and you should have urgency if you want to consume all of these different books. So buy more books than you're going to read. Never feel guilty for having unread books around you. Fill up your life with books. And the next mistake that people make is not buying books because they view them as an expense. Books aren't expenses, they are investments. You can buy most books for like $10, but there's an opportunity there for you to get incredible ROI, 100x ROI. Remember, in a few hours, you can get years worth of knowledge. The next mistake is focusing on the wrong things. It doesn't matter exactly how you take notes. When you're reading for understanding. All of this other stuff, highlighting, reading notes, active recall, can come later. You must first understand what you're reading. And the next mistake, which is the last mistake that we'll get onto before I reveal what may actually be better than reading completely, is people asking the question, should I read or should I listen to audiobooks? In my mind, it's not a trade-off. First of all, you should be doing both at separate times. You should be reading when you feel like reading, when you're excited to read, and you should be listening to audiobooks when you're excited to listen to audiobooks. Listen to your heart. Follow what excites you. Follow what makes you curious. This is the biggest takeaway from this video. But also, just like we have deep work, we should have deep learning. Instead of just occasionally picking up a book and skimming through, if you're really serious about learning and acquiring wisdom, then you should do both at the same time. You should read books and listen to audiobooks at the same time. Now, obviously, I mean read the same book. Don't listen to a different audiobook to the one that you're reading. Read a book, listen to the audiobook of that book at the exact same time. This way, you're getting the benefits of auditory learning as well as visual learning. This is a hack, and eventually once you do this and you practice, you'll get into a state of flow where you're just consuming the knowledge, it's entering your brain and you're retaining it because all of the different stimuli that you can use are being put towards learning. And also, when you're listening to audiobooks, constantly be bumping up the speed to which you are listening to audiobooks. Obviously, if you can listen to an audiobook at 2x speed, you're able to get double the information in the same amount of time as you would, or you're able to get the same amount of information in half the time. But also, when you bump the speed up, even if your retention and your comprehension reduces slightly, chances are the bump increase in speed will be significant enough that the trade-off is worth it even if your retention drops. So when I'm listening to audiobooks, I'm always pushing my comfort zone. I'm always pushing to the point where I'm really having to strain. Otherwise, I'm getting bored. I'm not fully applying myself. When I'm listening just past my comfort zone, I'm in that state where I'm fully absorbing the information. I'm having to concentrate, and that is where serious learning happens. Now, with that being said, there is an alternative use of your time that perhaps is more efficient than reading altogether. Before I read any book, I will listen to the TED Talk, I will listen to the talks of Google, or I will listen to any podcasts that author made on a tour of his book. This is how you can get the 80-20 of a book. This is how you can get the core concepts of a book summarized and distilled in just a few minutes. It's the 80-20. Remember, your time is limited. If there's ever a more efficient use of your time, you should be using that. So before you read any book, listen to the TED Talk, go online, read summaries, try and consume the knowledge, and then read books if and only if you're still excited to dive deeper into the concept. Remember, your time is limited. Be very careful about how you use your time. Try and be efficient with your learning. Tomorrow, we are doing a dopamine detox challenge, and I'm so excited to be joining you. We're going to be doing it live. I appreciate you for making it to day 6 of the challenge, and I'm excited to do the dopamine detox. Talk to you tomorrow.